Hi everyone, good evening. I'll be speaking about operant conditioning, a concept in behaviourism. Following on from Flora's presentation on B.F. Skinner and the rat experiment, also known as the Skinner box, the idea behind operant conditioning is if an action has a pleasant consequence, it is likely to be repeated, while if it has an unpleasant consequence, it is less likely to be repeated. I will be discussing two key concepts of operant conditioning, reinforcement and punishment, and explaining how operant conditioning is learning by consequence. I will finish off by looking at how forms of operant conditioning affect our daily lives. If we have behaviour we want to strengthen or increase, reinforcement increases the chances of that behaviour being repeated. It is also important to note that reinforcement occurs after a behaviour. Now let's look at punishment. The main purpose of punishment is to weaken your response or decrease a behaviour. So reinforcement increases the desired behaviour, while punishment decreases an unwanted behaviour. Skinner also realised that behaviour can be affected by adding or taking something away. Positive refers to the positive sign of maths, which means to add something. Likewise, negative refers to taking something away from, the minus sign. Let's look at how positive reinforcement works. Positive reinforcement strengthens a behaviour by exposing a person to a consequence they find rewarding. Imagine a scenario. A child has a messy room. Their parents want them to clean it, but what's the payoff? What's in it for the kid? By adding a positive reinforcement, something that is valued or desirable makes it more likely to increase the behaviour. So what can the parent add that's some sort of reward? Well, it could be praise, hey, you did a great job, or money, an extra £1 added to pocket money for cleaning the room. Other examples of positive reinforcement are with a child, after you finish dinner, you can have a dessert. Or when training your dog, a new command like sit, rewarding your dog with a treat every time it sits on your command. Okay, now let's look at negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement strengthens behaviour because it stops or removes an unpleasant experience. Using the same scenario for the messy room, so as a parent you could try negative reinforcement. Let's break it down into its parts. First, reinforcement means to strengthen a behaviour, and negative reinforcement means to take something away to strengthen a behaviour. By removing the unpleasant consequence, it would feel like a reward. For example, the nagging would be the unpleasant consequence, so by cleaning your room you remove the nagging. But you can't keep praising or nagging forever, just as you can't give your dog a treat every single time they do something good. You need to phase out the reinforcement while still keeping the desired behaviour. To do that, you need reinforcement scheduling, which is a schedule on how to phase out reinforcements. There's a lot more study on scheduling, especially unpredicted and variable reinforcement, that I will touch on at the end. Let's now look at punishment. The main purpose of punishment is to weaken a behaviour. Positive punishment is where punishment is added to weaken or decrease behaviour. So imagine this scenario. An employee keeps arriving late to work. What's the manager to do? Again, they have two options: positive punishment or negative punishment. Positive punishment means to weaken the behaviour by adding something. For example, the employee has to make that time up by coming in at the weekend, or has to work with a colleague that they really don't like. This is to decrease or weaken the behaviour of arriving late to work as a form of punishment. Other examples of positive punishment might be a detention, adding time in class after school, or going to prison, adding a jail sentence. Now let's look at negative punishment. Negative punishment is when something desirable is taken away to weaken or decrease a behaviour. So with negative punishment, your manager decides to remove your staff discounts as punishment for your behaviour of arriving to work late. Going back to cleaning the room scenario, something taken away could be being grounded, which is taking time away from your friends, or no games console, taking away a form of enjoyment. So what works best? Positive, negative punishment, or positive, negative reinforcement? Depends on the situation. Going to prison is an example of both negative and positive punishment. You have added jail, which is positive punishment, and at the same time you have taken freedom, friends, family away from them, negative punishment. But how successful is prison? How many people come out to re-offend again? How much more successful is it when positive reinforcement is added, like rehabilitation or therapy? Does punishment really work? Studies have shown the effectiveness of the conditioning is dependent on the situation. Punishment often results in strong links in the short term, but if you want long-term behavioural changes, you will need reinforcement. Okay, but what works best, positive or negative reinforcement? Again, depends on the situation. Some studies have found that while raising a child, positive reinforcement is more effective, while negative reinforcement doesn't have the same effects. While in other contexts, negative reinforcement might be the best, however, it's a combination of the two that gives the best results. By both reinforcing with positive and negative. For example, giving a reward with praise for cleaning the room while simultaneously removing negative consequence, stopping the nagging. This is both positive and negative reinforcement in one example and has a greater effect. Which leads me to end with, how does this all affect our daily lives? Operant conditioning explains a wide variety of behaviours and learning processes by helping us to understand the relationship between behaviour and its consequence. It also has many applications in everyday life, such as employment, an employee who receives a bonus after hitting their sales target. Positive reinforcement is at the heart of every loyalty program, be it store loyalty cards issued by supermarkets or gym memberships. The success of these is on the rewards. When a business offers exclusive rewards in exchange for profitable customer behaviour, such as making a purchase at their store or referring a friend, the user becomes quick to understand how their actions are linked to the benefits they receive. In Skinner's concept of behaviourism, to take action that leads to rewards, Skinner noticed the most addictive forms of reward are those that are unpredictable or variable. So the example, slot machines, fishing, golf, social media, emails are all things that may really capture our interest, but where the rewards and payouts are quite unpredictable. Emails have this quality, so does Facebook. Most of the time you show up and there's not much really going on, but occasionally you might see something extraordinary, an email with some good news or something really meaningful. Or you might log into social media. Most of the time it's kind of a bore, but occasionally something quite profound is there. This turns out to be the most compelling kind of variable reward schemes that most of us get involved in. Video games are another form of unpredictable reinforcement to keep gamers engaged. So, conclusions and critics. While Skinner was correct that behaviour can be modified via this system, it's only one of many methods for doing so, and it fails to take into account how emotions, thoughts, and, as we learned eventually, the brain itself accounts for changes in behaviour. Some critics felt positive reinforcement amounted to bribery. Interestingly, UK government has recently been exploring the use of financial incentives to encourage people to become more healthier and more active as part of the fight against obesity. Bribery? Skinner implied that humans had no free will or individual consciousness, but could simply be controlled by reward and punishment. Skinner coined the term positive reinforcement, and my own personal conclusion is that we do use some forms of operant conditioning without knowing we're doing so. Can you escape the Skinner box? Is operant conditioning something you recognise in your life?